Okay, sige. So given na merong possibility of the ending of someone, whether bodily or image, yung image nila. So how do we respond in relation to death? Siguro for now, let's focus muna dun sa bodily death in the sense na yung that nag-stop yung functioning of the body and also the mental state. Wala nang nagkaroon ng end yung mental state mo. How we usually react, obviously we cannot react if we're the one who died, no? But the people who are left behind, we usually approach this with sorrow, siguro lungkot, di ba? So yun. So this is my mom. In 1 week, dalawang kapatid niya yung namatay. Pero not of the same cause, no? So not of the same cause, and also yung isa nasa Amerika, yung isa nasa Pilipinas, namatay sila within 1 week. And siya yung and to be honest, when I was taking this photograph, it felt uncomfortable for me. Somehow, as a photographer, I felt like, why do I need to take a photograph of my mom crying? For me, parang, am I trying to aestheticize? Am I recording it lang? Or am I trying to aestheticize a moment? Siguro there's somehow a friction between the idea of aesthetization or aestheticizing something, a sorrowful event, internally felt a bit uncomfortable in photographing my mom crying. Parang I could have just left her alone. So in a way, photography is also an intervention in space and time, diba? So diba? If you think of photography, you're intervening in reality, as with any kind of action naman to be encompassive. But again, specific to photography, there is parang the moment you try to intervene through that yung cross section of reality and making an index of that, tayo rin nasanay tayo na there is adverse feelings of trying to capture something that is sorrowful, and yet because we associate photography as something that is an aestheticized moment or a subjective convergence, as ginamit nga ni John Roberts, kaya I felt bad that I had to take this picture, and yet I kept it. I don't know why. So and it's not a good feeling to see my mom cry in real life, and then I still photograph, and now looking at her, parang naiyak din ako, no? And I can remember things that she was experiencing during that time, that she was crying for one brother and one sister who died within the same week. And parang nangyari, parang nagiging transmutable patuloy yung ending of two lives. May effect siguro na lang, may effect sa isang someone na naiwan. And then ako naman, nag-photograph ako. Parang yung response ko was to photograph, and I do not know if that is something wrong. I think there was something parang distasteful of me photographing my mom. Diba? So parang yun nga parang why do I want to keep a trace of that moment that my mom was crying? Siguro yun din yun, no? So ano rin to, parang it talks about how emotions get transferred or how memories work, in the sense na parang you're going back through time and then you remember the qualia, yung the sadness of that moment, di ba? Somehow through a visual representation or an artifact, I am able to phenomenologically experience the same sadness that my mom had and I had during that time. So yun yung things that nangyayari about, yun yung siguro parang interesting, and also siguro parang mga questions or pwedeng other areas of inquiry when it comes to photography. So why do I get the same emotion I had during that time nung pinicturean ko yung mom ko, and why am I feeling it the same now, the same thing now that I'm looking at her, no? Tapos maliban pa doon, how do we react when it comes to death in relation to photography, no? So we have also seen this, pag ang friend mo sa Facebook biglang nag-itim yung profile pic. Nako, alam na natin kahit wala na siya i-post automatic na yan, 'di ba? Sabi mo condolence, parang our prayers, 'di ba? We sending our prayers and hugs, 'di ba? Parang kadalasan ganun So why do we react that way? Siguro an image of a person, an extinguishing the sudden disappearance of an image of a person, our friend, hindi not necessarily siya namatay, in relation to the persistence of an image. If someone suddenly loses their image or appearance, there is something that has transpired that is undesirable. So in this case, hindi naman sila yung namatay, and yet you know that because of a death, ang assumption dito agad death, at least sa Pilipinas. If you go to the US, iba yung meaning ng kasi minsan Black Lives Matter, or minsan sad lang sila, nagba-black na sila, 'di ba, sa US. Pero sa Philippines, hindi ka magba-black na ganyan kung walang namatay sa family, bihira lang. Well, nakita ko lang dati nung nakisabay yung mga Pilipino sa Black Lives Matter sa US, no? And I think, actually yun lang. I don't remember any time na naging quote-unquote trend na nag-block yung profile ng mga tao sa Facebook. So, we can siguro parang draw out some conclusions or at least assumptions na the reason that they're blacking out, or blacking as in black, as in pinaitim, they try to take away an appearance of themselves is also to express that an event that is undesirable happened. And in the Philippine context, probably that is a death in the family, di ba? So yun yung nangyayari. The photographic process or the encounter with the photographic process is not just in relation to, for example, our friend and the relationship to the person who died. It also is cultural. When we look at this phenomenon na people blacking out their profile pictures, we are able to associate or empathize to what they're experiencing. And it's a visual phenomenon, diba? So it's a visual phenomenon. That is also one cultural aspect now we see in the Philippines na pag a death is usually, there's usually a response to a death that is in relation to the absence of an image. We see that a death usually has a response wherein an image is taken out. And in this case, even if that person that we're a friend of ours is not the person who died, the fact that there is no image of him or her, somehow we can commiserate kung ano yung nangyari. We have a visual cue of a phenomenon that happened to them in relation to the persistence of an image, diba? And in relation to death. Tapos siguro ito nakakatawa to, pero sige, i-play natin.
Steady lang. Pagka-shine ko muna. Steady. Wait lang. Okay, lahat tingin dito sa camera. 1, 2, 3, smile. Ay, smile. Sorry po. Kasali sa pasahan.
Ayun, diba? So, kasi nung lumabas din to sa Facebook, nagtawa na yung mga tao, parang mga 1 million views yata to, no? Kasi pipicturean yung sa simbahan, nandun yung family, malungkot dapat, and then sabi nung photographer, sabi niya, okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. Tapos sabi niya, sorry kasi nasanay ako sa wedding, no? So, that is also parang a reminder of yung practical side of photography, di ba? Sa perspective of professional photographer. Somehow, minsan nakakalimutan, nga pala, wait, may mga practices tayo in relation to the photographic process that when we go to shoot a specific event, and in this case, diba, parang ito parang parang ito na yung last day or last time before i-bury yung dead. It is supposed to be a somber event, and yet sabi niya smile. Kita niyo na parang in relationship din of the event, the photograph, and the practice of photography. So yan. Tapos siguro kung sinabi niyo na ako lang nag-iisip ng about death and photography, hindi lang naman, marami naman. Actually, marami pa. Pero specific lang to siguro kasi lumabas to ng 2023. I think sold out na tong book na to. You can look for this, no? So to photograph is to learn how to die. So, well, obviously hindi lang ako, no? I mean, yung meditations or at least yung parang yung musings about the relationship of an image and the persistence of life or a persistence of consciousness is not a new thing. Pero I just did it in podcast manner, so I guess. So, pero you can also look for this yung itong book na to, no, if you're interested. Yun. So we think of photography and death has a relationship between a finitude of an image. Siguro kung if I'm going to summarize yung nature of death and photography, probably it's the idea of the finitude or persistence of an image. Diba? So, and that is usually, I mean, kanina kinaracterize natin siya through the context of an indexical sign. Diba? So, or a proof or a trace of an existence in front of the camera. Okay. And because of this, siguro, other aspects of the photographic image, we can think of a photograph as an artifice. Meaning artifice is what you see, manifest surface, what it appears. Diba? Kadalasan yung artifice, we think of this pejoratively, diba? When you think of yung term na artifice, kadalasan pejorative siya gamitin, na parang artifice fake, diba? So yung fake. But then again, artifice, and in photography, kadalasan, you also talk of the artifice as the surface image, yung surface nature, diba? Surface nature of a photograph. And then you think of a photograph also as an artifact. So this is also the reason why we have photographs as keepsakes, diba? So photographs as keepsakes. So there is something artifactual about a photograph. There is a durability of the image, and the durability is a material durability. Kasi a photographic image technically is, pag sinabi natin photography, technically it is not a photographic print. When you think of photography, it is a photographic image. It just happens that you print it out. Diba? So so may distinction between the photographic image and the photographic artifact. Those are two different things. Syempre, obviously, diba, interrelated sila. Lalo na at the start of its development, diba? The first photographs were a one-off. One image, one photographic image, one print. Diba? And the print, or at least the imprint on a daguerreotype is something physical, material. It is something that is you can touch, tangible. And I think this is also one of the critique about digital photography, that nung nagkaroon ng digital photography, the materiality of photography disappeared, in the sense na there is nothing that you can touch about a photograph anymore, just the image. So yan yung one of the critiques nung unang lumabas yung digital photography, that somehow you took away the materiality of the image. Because prior to that, you can only make a photograph materially. There is no other way. You have to expose silver halides, or well, yun na yung diba, yung Kodak, or for example yung celluloid na film. And prior to that, siguro yung mga glass films, yung glass negatives, tapos yung daguerreotypes, antotypes, yung mga ganun, there is a material presence, a tangibility. There is a physical, durable, material presence of a photograph. And nung nagkaroon ng digital photography, suddenly, nakahiwalay na naman. Again, it doesn't mean naman na that's the first time na naghiwalay siya. Even if it existed in the same image, a material manifestation of a photograph and also the visual manifestation of a photograph, they just happen to be in the same object. But nung nagkaroon ng digital photography, somehow mas obvious na yung distanciation between those two characteristics of a photograph. So there's the artifice and the artifact. And syempre in most conversations about photography, minsan diba ipinapasok yung word na art. But itong art na to, again, I think yung what kadalasan how I use this, actually I learned this also from Dr. Barbasa, yung poesis. So not all photographs are art. I think siguro I will hold that stand argument for now. Na not all photographs are art. In the sense na where is the poesis? Kasi for example, if a surveillance camera, a photograph of someone who's stealing something sa bangko, is that art? Siguro probably there's a certain performativity, diba? There's a certain self-referential activity happening. But unless you articulate that in an artist statement, the surface nature of a photograph lacking poesis, then probably that photograph is not automatically art, diba? So siguro kung gagamitin ko yung language ni Doc Barbasa, there is the technique and then there's the poesis. So you can create something, I mean both mean creating, and yet not all creation that has technique has poesis. So I think nabasa ko rin to sa part ni Heidegger, no? So binigyan ako ng reading materials ni Dr. Barbasa na parang how does Heidegger, diba? I mean, how does he explicate the idea of art? Okay, siguro malapit na tayong matapos, no? The way we think of photographs, we have been used to attaching a certain aspect or value on a photograph that is attached or parang in reference to special events of our lives. Because diba, kanina sinabi natin that the photograph would be a singular event. So it's a slice of life. It's a cross section of that time, that siguro space-time continuum. And then you put that on a photograph, and then it becomes a proof of that event. And because of that value na you are able to see that convergence in an image, especially during the times na the cost of a photograph is very expensive, photography was used only to photograph the important things. And in the Filipino experience, what are those? Diba? So I'm borrowing the slides from Sir J. Javier. So he gave we had a podcast last week. So something to do with proto-martyr, salon photography, the history of photography in the Philippines. So I borrowed 3 slides from Sir J lang, no. So doon natin kaya nagkaroon ng kultura of photography ng KBL, which is since it's expensive, and then a photograph usually is attached to an important singular event, then the economies of it the economies of that entire practice, naggamit tuloy siya doon lang sa mga important na mga bagay. So to mark, 'di ba? To mark special events in our lives. Kaya nauso or in practice yung kasal, binyag, at saka libing, 'di ba? So yung libing yun yung latter part of our lives, actually the end of our lives, 'di ba? So kaya yung KBL, we have to see the value of that practice in the sense na it tells so much about the human experience in relation to photography. Kadalasan, jokingly, some people try to trivialize KBL na parang walang art dyan. You're just basically, I mean, may formula na. It's formulaic. Diba? Paano mag-shoot ng binyag? Paano ka mag-shoot ng kasal? Paano ka mag-shoot ng libing? Kadalasan ganyan yung tingin, medyo trivial, or sabihin natin hindi man trivial, parang hindi siya artistic expression. It's not a place or a site wherein you try to really to express yourself as a photographer. You're just documenting things. But you have to understand that the nature of a KBL practice, lalo na sa Pilipinas, at saka I think Sir Jay also mentioned na in the Philippine human experience, yung photography in the KBL, distinctive din siya. Hindi lahat ng countries may KBL practice on photography. Hindi lahat ng countries sa mundo ginamit ang photography to shoot kasal, binyag, libing. Hindi lahat. So, hindi naman siya distinctively Filipino, but at least somehow, without people telling us, Filipinos were able to find value in a very mechanical process, a very mechanical medium, unlike painting, diba? And because of that usage, photography became associated with our lives, the value of our temporal existence, temporal and spatial experiences as Filipinos. Kaya when we think, ako specifically, if I think of KBL, hindi ako automatically dismissive because it captures an ethnographic phenomenon of a community or a group of people trying to mark special events in their lives using an image. Yun yung siguro take ko on why KBL is not necessarily something that is that is not trivial now. So, and then siguro, binaro ko din, hindi ko pinaalam kay Ina. Siguro this photograph also provides some visual cues. It showcases why we photograph. Syempre, you can read on Sontag, you can read on Barthes. Lalo na si Barthes, if you read yung camera lucida niya, the reason na sobrang lalim niyang basa niya sa photograph, well, philosopher naman na siya. But what I'm saying is that there's a special moment in Bart's life. Now, when he was reading a photograph, it was a photograph of his mom, yung mother niya namatay. So kaya in camera lucida, merong part na specific to the musings and also the meditations of Roland Barthes in relation to the umbilical cord. Actually, yung term na ginamit na is there's an umbilical cord wherein the referent, which is something that existed, a person, a time, a space, and looking at a photograph, there's an umbilical cord that connects those two events, phenomenological events, diba? So he was describing that the dual nature of a photograph, wherein it exists as an artifact of the past, and yet it is viewed in the present. And in the process of reading that kind of artifact, it is a bit different as compared to looking at a painting. So may certain affordances, may certain affordances in photography that you will not find in painting or sculpture. Siguro in the language of affordances, that makes it that the index and that umbilical cord of that referent and the final output, you do not find that in painting kasi you can paint without a subject. In photography, you cannot have a representation of something without having that subject or that entity or that body going in front of the camera and having it photographed. So sa painting, you can paint something from your mind. In photography, you cannot do that. So that's one of the affordances or the distinctive characteristics of photography. So in this case, this is a visual lang, a showcase of why do we photograph. Again, you can go back to the writers, no? So Sontag, sila Barthes, Sarkowski, marami sila. Pero in this case, kasi since ang focus ko is Filipino, so I'm trying to give Filipino examples and I mean, read it through the Filipino lens. So hindi to writing, pero these are photographs. So in this case, so this is by Ina Tew. So nakasulat sa photograph niya, no? So I take pictures so I can remember. So it also brings in the attachment or the associations with memory. Diba? So kadalasan when we think of photography, there's memory, the nature of memory, the persistence of images in our minds. To a certain extent, that is memory. Diba? The persistence of images, quote-unquote images, as in not necessarily stimulus, images, and not just visual images. That persistence in our minds is memory. Diba? So in this case, yun, she was just saying that the reason I photograph is because I can remember. We go back to the durability, diba? The material durability of an image. In this case, hindi siya physical photo, but the photographic image, at least there is a parang persistence of this. Pero in the form of data, syempre pixels na siya. So kaya ang dami pwedeng pag-usapan about photography na. Tapos yung photograph na to, I think yung guy is parang soulmate niya daw to, soulmate niya. So even the language and our associations with photography, somehow there's something interior about it, diba? So when we think of photographs, there's a certain external manifestation of something interior, at least in these photographs. So in a way, what is inside Ina, thoughts, feelings, emotions, being, was externalized through a photograph. So and the photographs were made specifically for, well, hindi ko nakuha yung name, no, pero sabi niya soulmate niya yung guy. And you would see, no, yung ano pa, diba, meron pa din dito na, yung, if you're going to read it semiotically, meron pang, diba, parang hilo, and then merong Christian iconography pa dyan, kung tutuusin. Ayan. Tapos siguro naman, how does, even yung idea of death and photographs, it is also being explored. Yung kanina kay Ina, personal explorations yan of the relation between a photographic image and death. And siguro life. And kasi birthday yun pala. The reason pala na pinotograph niya to, kasi birthday nung soulmate niya. This guy. So yun. So birthday, pinotograph niya. So medyo similar sa KBL, diba? So kaya nga interesting din. Yun yung sa when it comes to the personal aspect. Pero when you go to, for example, the institutional explorations of death. So in 2007, there was an exhibit in Mo Space. It was curated by Roberto Jabet. So for those sa mga sa inyo na mahilig or interested sa art, I hope you know Roberto Jabet. No? He is considered as the quote-unquote the father of conceptual art in the Philippines. Pero kasi yung the father of parang medyo ayoko yung term na yun. But nevertheless, siguro to follow the convention of the art world, we can say na Roberto Chabet is hailed as the father of Philippine conceptual art. And he was one of the first artists in the Philippines that consciously used photography in art. Kasi during that time, photography in the Philippines was mostly used in newspapers. Diba? So, I think recorded, yung mga may documents, 1967, there were 5 photojournalists or documentary photographers that tried to use photographs artistically, and they had an exhibit in I forgot the name of the gallery. Gallery Indigo by Ben Cab. So Ben Cab, syempre we know Ben Cab, no? Yung gallery ni Ben Cab, doon na-exhibit yung 5 photographers in 1967, and they were photojournalists. So historically, the idea of photographs as art, somehow hindi siya ganun talaga ka-explored. And so yun yung historical background yan. And noong 2007, Roberto Jabet had an exhibit na kinorate niya. The people here na listed sa exhibit na to, most of them are students niya sa UP. And this was an interesting exhibit because it was somehow a surveyistic exhibit. Pag sinabi ng surveyistic, they were trying to get different kinds of photographers and have their work in one place. Pero to be honest, the nature of the photographs that were curated is mostly conceptual. Kasi students nga ni Sir Chabet, no? So, pero as you would see in the title, shoot me photographs now. When you go to the curatorial text, ito yung interesting dun sa curatorial text niya, no? So, to be is to be perceived. And I think galing yung kay Bishop, Bishop Berkeley, kaso pala. So yung kay Bishop Berkeley, diba, when you go to philosophy, to be is to be perceived. Yung ontology of the human person, the idea is that photographs is a medium wherein you can explore being. So kaya curatorial statement dito is to be perceived. So copying from Bishop Berkeley yung concept ng yung curation. So in a way, this is also an approach or para a response of artists in relation to that idea or the relationship between a photograph and death, diba? Or being, siguro you can say being. So yun. So this is a special exhibit noong 2007. And then, ayan, hindi alam ni Doc Barbasa to, no? So napansin niyo yung conversation natin today. Medyo, again, I have to apologize because I am not a technical philosopher. So kaya I think I have said a lot of things na need to be corrected, no? Hindi ako technical philosopher. So some of the words that I'm saying, I'm using language from photography. I'm not using language from philosophy. So kaya I have to apologize, especially for those who are real philosophers now. But nevertheless, if you want real philosophy and philosophy of photography, the first time I presented this, yung talks ko nung mula October hanggang December, kasi I had 2 talks. I presented that this is the first time I've seen a school going to teach philosophy of photography. As per dun sa podcast namin ni Dr. Barba, sabi niya, it's not necessarily the school, but the faculty who thinks of the curriculum or the subjects that's going to be offered. So in this case, Dr. Barbasa came up with the idea to teach the philosophy of photography. And this photograph, this is by Teodulo Protomartyr. So for those who are interested also in the history of photography, you can also check yung you see Teodulo Protomartyr. And ang main researcher nun is si Roderick Javier. Siya yung speaker last week. So siya yung main researcher. So this photographs yung archival work, conservation work with Teodulo Protomartyr. So si Sir Jay yun. So co-faculty ko rin siya sa Binil. And then last night po si Doc Barbasa, no. So reminder lang yan, meron ng dates at saka schedule ng classes, no. So yung venue na lang nawala. And you would see here, diba? So Malcolm at saka I think Benjamin. So Dr. Barbasa also had an episode with us already in Photography Chismis. So he's a associate professor, if I'm not mistaken, associate professor in Ateneo. So for those who would want to really go explore the philosophy of photography, you can enroll in this class, yung sa class niya sa Ateneo. So sa August yun. And yung topic is about death, di ba? So, and nagkataon din na recently nag-release ng journal na guest editor si Dr. Verbasa. A journal about philosophy. Tapos about Heidegger. So yung photograph na to kanya to. So for those who are viewing, no. So Dr. Barbasa is also a photographer. This photograph is of fountain outside Heidegger's hut. So when you read niya yung description dito, he describes this photograph as an output or parang an index of his quote-unquote pilgrimage. Obviously, it's not necessarily well. You can think of pilgrimage in different ways. No? Pero he makes the metaphor of a pilgrimage to Heidegger. And when he was there with 2 other researchers, he took this photograph together with his wife. No, so when you look at this, it goes full circle. No, so we're talking about ontology, we're talking about photography, we're talking about Philippine photography, and we're talking about death. And the photograph of Dr. Barbasa is circular. Ang galing lang din na kaya sinama ko to kasi it reminds us of, kasi for Heidegger, we think of, for us individuals, we should be conscious of our mortality, that for us to be, yun lang yung maximum natin, meron tayong dulo. That is reality for us. Limited yun, yung time na yun, na hanggang death lang yun. After that, there's nothing else we can talk about. We cannot talk about something outside that limitation, diba? Yung boundaries of life. Yun. And then siguro, kung magkakaroon lang tayo ng cultural application when it comes to death and photography. Sabi natin kanina, diba, photography is the ending of an image. Diba? Once you curtail the manifestation of an image, that is death. You are causing death. Diba? So if we're going to apply this to art and also siguro political or siguro visual activism, these are photographs made by So si Kiri Dalena, she's an artist. What she did was that she got photographs from archival images of yung mga rallies ng 1970s. So alam naman natin historically in the Philippine experience what happened in the 70s. So ang ginawa niya, yung mga photographs ng rallies na yun, kinuha niya from archives. Again, another aspect of the discourse of photography is something to do with post-colonialism, anti-colonialism, presentism. I think ito yung mga conversation about photography in relation naman sa cultural studies. A photograph is an index of what happened in the past. So, diba? So that's given. It's an index of what happened in the past. And it's tied. There's an umbilical cord that ties us are present from the past because of that indexical aspect of a photograph. So the archive, to a certain extent, has dual purpose. It is a record of what happened in the past. And yet, if you think of archives in the post-colonial perspective, we can try to uncover what is in the archives, whether it's in yung University of Michigan, kasi may mga photographs doon ng ano kay Worcester or Worcester, actually Worcester daw basa doon. So kay Worcester, yung ano colonial photographs of the Philippines. So there's an archive there in the University of Michigan. What some writers are doing right now in photography, in cultural studies, tsaka in art criticism, what they're trying to do is they're going to the archives in the University of Michigan and other kinds of archives in Ateneo, iba-ibang sources. What they're doing is they're trying to uncover it and they're reading it with the presentist eye. Meaning, when you look at a photograph from the archives, it just shows that we were dominated. There is a hegemony, there's a hegemony or an imposition of power through representation. Meaning, Philippines as a subject to the colony was represented in other places, one as exoticized entities or exoticized subjects or exoticized beings. So we were cataloged in a way, parang we were wild animals to a certain extent. We were treated as wild animals. We were subjects of spectacle and spectacle of the Western eye. And those are the content of the archives of colonial photographs. We were a subject. So there was an imposition of power through representation. The hegemony or the imperial gaze, siguro we can use that term, no? The imperial gaze. Nung pino-photograph tayo during that time, we were seen as subjects, diba? So we were spectacles. So the archive exists that way. We are spectacles. What some contemporary writers are doing right now, they're getting that same photographs and then they're reading it in a post-colonial gaze, or not post-colonial, anti-colonial gaze. And some of them, like for example, actually, I'm not going to name names now. Some of them are reading in such a liberal manner that somehow I feel like they're trying to divorce the photograph from the index itself. So when what they're doing is that with the same photograph, they're reading it with an anti-colonial lens, in the sense that they're saying, well, actually, I cannot give example kasi lalabas ko sino yung sinasabi ko, no? But nevertheless, ang point lang doon is that there is a certain consciousness in contemporary art criticism, is specifically to photography, wherein people are writing about historical photographs but using the presentist eye. Meaning, I'm reading it with the bias of the now. And that bias for most of these critics is justified. Diba? So when we think of the presentist, usually we see it in a pejorative, meaning it's a negative thing. However, how writers who are doing it right now, when they look at the archives, they are aware that they're trying to read it with a certain rebellion on our representation. Kaya yun, I'm a moderate, I guess. I'm a moderate. I would agree why a certain motivation is present in doing that, especially na ngayon the idea of the decolonized gaze, diba? We're trying to decolonize the gaze. But I think we cannot fully divorce that photograph from where it existed. Yun nga yung nature niya, it is indexical. You cannot suddenly say na you're reading it on the now, but you're reading the now as that is connected to the past. It's not a painting. Siguro kung painting, go ahead, diba? It's not indexical, diba? So pero ang magiging mga rationalization na lang dito, syempre, there's a certain epistemic, diba? Yung epistemic na parang when you look at a photograph, there is something revealed to you. Kaya yun yung mga naririnig ko or nababasa ko na parang justification for that anti-colonial gaze. In the sense that if I want to be anti-colonial, the only way I can do that is to, quote-unquote, reread history using an anti-colonial gaze. To be anti-colonial is to read it in a presentist eye. Because if you're just going to read it from what has been, how a photograph has been read, then you're just promulgating, diba, the existing narrative that we were subjects, that we didn't have agency as a country. Kaya I understand the motivation, but ako, medyo moderate ako in the sense that I think it's heavy-handed for us to totally divorce a photograph, especially historical photographs, from where it came from, that event that happened from the past. So kasi epistemically, you're denying facts. To a certain extent, you're denying facts. Diba? I mean, I understand the goal of putting a new reading to things, Diba? It might be too heavy-handed na nagiging denialist ka na. Yun lang siguro. Pero kung, I'm not saying all writers do that. Pero yung siguro taken to one extreme, ang difficult lang dyan is you think of a photograph and you become a denialist. And when you become a denialist, how different are you with the Marcos? Oy, diba? Baka ma-censor tayo. How different are you with yung ano, diba? Yung the people in the position of power. They're trying to revise history. You're up in arms saying na you shouldn't do that, and yet you're doing the same thing. Kaya ako medyo moderate ako dun in that case, no. But nevertheless, ito specific to Kiri. I think ito walang problema kasi merong intervention. Kasi yung intervention on the photographic image, that makes all the difference. If you're just leaving it as is, yung intervention mo is in the reading, medyo I'm not very comfortable about it because it's an index eh. Pero if you have an intervention on the photographic image, and that intervention basically is a manifestation of your agency, then I would understand. So in this case, yung kay Kiri, kinuha niya yung photographs from archival photographs, and may intervention. Ang ginawa niya, to make a statement as an artist, ang ginawa niya, inerase niya yung mga slogans. Diba? So, in that case, here, if we're going to extend the reading of death in cultural terms, diba, or historical terms, in a way, we can say that during those times, the death of a country happened because we were silenced. Diba? It was silencing the image or silencing the voice. Again, when I say image, I'm not just talking about the visual image. The image of revolt, the image of agency. People were being silenced. To a certain extent, we can say that death is silencing, preventing people to voice out or to act out their agency as citizens, as Filipinos. So, in a way, okay lang ako doon kasi there's an intervention that is clear in these images. No? So in this case, so what Kiri did is yung mga placards, yung mga slogans, binura niya. So to make that statement, artistic statement, binura niya. So when you look at these photographs, you know that during those time, parang sina-silence yung tao, diba, yung society, na hindi sila makakilos. So parang in a way, it's a death of a nation, diba? So may relations sa death. So if you think of image or the silencing of an image as death, then this is death in cultural terms or historical terms or political terms. So yan. So to finish this, haba. Sabi ko 15 minutes, tapos ngayon more than 2.5 hours na palang salita. If you also want to, kasi yun nga, there is a dominance of the Western reading of photographs. I don't mind. I mean, again, moderate ako. Pero I think I'm introducing these theorists and writers and si Doc JP. Sa UP naman siya. This is his dissertation. For yung dissertation niya, so PhD, yung doctorate niya, about photography. So, one of the statements niya dito na medyo theoretical for me is that ang statement niya is all photographs are revisions, which I agree with. It is also rooted in the idea of a presentist reading, but I think ang maganda naman kay Sir JP, well, it's a book. So makikita mo yung na parang it is justified. Siguro I'm taking a pragmatist, stand in the sense na parang the truth is what could be justified, diba? So but well, siguro yun. So what could be justified as long as you're coming from what exists, no? So kay Dewey yata yun. Ang maganda naman kay Doc JP, kahit na merong presence of that decolonization, or at least hindi naman presentist, not fully presentist, hindi siya yung well, sana hindi magkalit sa akin yung isa pa to. So pero nevertheless, yun yung point ko lang na parang kinontextualize niya yung Philippine photographs. So his dissertation, you can look for this. He talks about photography as an imperative. In a way, this also brings us back to that idea na why do we have this tendency to use photographs in capturing everything? If only siguro we can photograph everything, we would, di ba? Isa sa mga idea ni Doc JP is that there's an imperative to keep something, to record something. Diba? So there's an imperative. And I think that imperative somehow, actually hindi ko pa tapos yung buong dissertation, mahaba kasi siya. Pero yung isa dun sa mga point niya is that there is something within us that prompts us to photograph. Diba? So there's a subjectivity, or the subject in us in a way is always prompted to photograph something. Siguro ang isang pwede nitong parang, siguro kung i-extend ko yung idea ni Sir JP, kung kaya lang natin mag-painting before, na lahat ng bagay ipapaint natin, probably people would have painted everything. But then again, hindi, di ba? But because of the nature of a photograph that is mechanical, it's easy to, it's accessible. If I can photograph everything, I would. Parang parang it's an imperative for me to photograph. Pero specifically to this paper, meron siyang mga certain experiences in Philippine history and Filipino themes. Like for example, it's a revolution. So that theme somehow is distinctively Filipino yun, diba? So yung that event, that cultural event, the way Doc JP reads this, it's a cultural reading of photographs. Kaya maganda siya. So I recommend for those who are interested in reading about photograph, and siguro if we try to be lofty and think of a possible Philippine photography, a label that we can justify, it starts with writers like Doc JP, like professors like Doc Barbasa, tapos siguro Sir J. Actually kami, ang goal namin, the faculty, ang goal namin is sana dumating yung panahon, or we can assist or we can help facilitate the articulation of what is Philippine in Philippine photography. So yun yung parang namin, one of our lofty goals, no? And we can also see it in other schools naman, hindi lang naman kami yung may gusto na mangyari yun. So ayan, so we can mention Doc Manzanilla. Any questions about this topic? Just to clarify also, this is the first time I'm giving this talk, kaya medyo kalat. I would have to clean this up. I apologize, no? Even the language that I'm using, minsan hindi siya specific. I'm very liberal, and also minsan I'm misusing siguro some terms. I hope I can improve in the future. In future iterations of this talk, I'm going to make a new version of this after a year, and then more examples siguro.
Yeah. Hi, hello, Tony. Thank you. Grabe energy mo.
Yes, no.
Yeah. Anyway, so thank you for for your episode this evening. Dami kong natutunan. I was taking notes. I just apologize. I couldn't really join you, through video and kanina even audio, no. But anyway, yeah, you got me thinking a lot, no. Yung relationship between photography, technology, and death, no. Really a fascinating topic, no. So thank you for that, no. This is not really a question, but just to also contribute to the discussion. As you were discussing, I recall a colleague of mine, a former colleague of mine, who was writing a dissertation on technology, and then one day he ran to me and then he said, Dr. Barbasa, finally, he was writing on technology, Heidegger and technology. And then finally he said, Doc, I know now what's behind modern technology. I said, okay, what? It's really about the denial of death, he said. No. So technology is, all the technology that we create is either a postponement, right? We speak of age defying, right? We postpone, we prolong our lives. All of the technologies are meant to deny our nature as ones who will die one day. So we don't die a good death. And for Heidegger, dying a good death is part of being authentic and as a human being. So yeah, I think your topic tonight really touched on that very important topic. And as I was listening to you, when you look at photographs, you spoke of the finitude of ano nga yan kanina, as a finitude of being or something.
The image, sir.
The image, no? Tama, no? It really, and thank you for that book, no? I'd like to, for referring to that book, I'd like to get hold of that. Now, to photograph is to practice dying. Oo nga eh. Ganun din. Like, philosophy is the practice of dying. No? They've been saying that for like more than 2,000 years ago. No? So, so which made me think then, a photograph is really, a photograph or photography is our attempt to come to terms with our finitude, no? With the fact that we will die one day, no? Whether consciously or unconsciously. That's really what photograph is. Now, we try to, as it were, capture. We say capture, diba? To memorialize, no? To preserve, no? What otherwise passes, no? Everything passes away. Everything passes. And when you look at your photographs of your childhood, for instance, then all the more, no? You see, hindi na ako yun, no? And you sometimes you don't even recognize a photograph of yourself as a child, and a lot of emotions, no, arise. But that has to do with the fact that if the child that I was passed, And now the me now will also pass, and one day I will be no more. No? So yeah, I think photography is a powerful experience. Has the potential for us human beings to come to terms with who we are. No? But anything that has the potential for truth, no? For the truth of who we are, what we are as human beings, can also be misused and abused, as Walter Benjamin spoke of in his book on photography. Abused by people who are in power, and we know that. So yun lang. I wanted to thank you for the thought-provoking episode, and also got me thinking. Salamat, Tony. Yeah.
Salamat, Doc. Actually, meron pa nga part dito, hindi ko natapos. How do you respond to that? Given that a conversation of photography in death is a conversation about the nature of an image, the finitude of an image, o kaya the persistence of an image. Siguro kukunin ko doon sa sinabi mo, Doc, yung one aspect of it, yung technologizing of reality, no? Kasi coming from Heidegger, kasi tinanay kong basahin yung sinanong mo sa akin na reading, yung technologizing reality. Siguro if we bring in Baudrillard pa, no? Siguro yung in modern society, yung the hyperreal, aside from the cultural and political and the economic, ito yung mga parang usual categories of critique, di ba? Yung political, cultural, tsaka historical discourses. And yet, merong part of it kasi yung sa cognitive science. If, for example, in the future, ngayon kasi may mga technologies na, Doc, na they can read minds na, di ba? So, I think parang may 4 na companies na sa US. There's even a TED Talk about it. They can read minds now. So, assuming lang na that technology, the technologizing of consciousness, if they are able to download our consciousness, apparently, all this, kasi nga, yung if you go to the physicalist perspective, everything, all the phenomenalist, these are electrical signals. Pwede mo nang i-download yung synapses na yon into data, and they are able to store it na. They can analyze it actually. There's a paper, I think, in Japan. They were able to read brain patterns and come up with photographs. So siguro yung photographs is a bit more liberal siguro yung usage ng photographs, in the sense that, for example, they were scanning MRI. They have an MRI scan of the brain patterns or electrical pulses, and then the AI can turn that idea or those electrical impulses into photographic image, quote unquote photographic, in the sense na they look indexical. Like, I think meron din paper about psychology in the sense na there's a photographic subconscious. All of the things that we hear or the way we perceive the world is actually photography, diba? So medyo pero medyo I think it's a bit stretched, but yung point lang na the image can now be downloaded, the subjective image can be downloaded into a computer, and that can be stored. And then I think there's a film about it, or my TV show sa Netflix yung Black Mirror. In the future, people might continue living their lives as synapses or electrical pulses or data in computers na. And when they experience reality in that computer, it will be photographic. Pero syempre, aside from mangyayari para siyang sensorium, hindi siya just photography lang, sensorium siya na you can smell, taste, hear, smell, touch, everything. But parang babalik tayo dun sa Cartesian na na parang brain in a vat. Pero in this case, even the brain will not exist. The mind will be in the form of data. It's going to be, consciousness will be in the form of data, and the sensorium will not be in relation to the physical part. It's just data in a computer. So parang yun yung one aspect of the trajectory on human civilization na probably in the future, baka ganun yung magiging yung parang technologized future natin, na we have lost the humanity, quote unquote, diba? But siguro parang a futurist might argue na parang the reason that we're adverse to that idea is because we have a nostalgia to the physical world, and yet functionally we are just Turing machine, diba? I think meron ding paper about it na parang may paper din na parang people are just Turing machines. Na parang functionally, if you can replicate that entire function of a human consciousness in a computer, diba? Medyo Baudrillard at saka medyo, pangalan ko his name, kalimutan ko na yung pragmatist na philosopher, na parang mangyayari, if you map it out, the functional existence of a person replicated in a computer, then there's going to be no difference. So a futurist might argue that probably the technologization, it is seen with parang adversarial perspective because we have a nostalgia to the physical, to the real world, and yet we are just electrical pulses, di ba? So, yun. Kaya, tapos yung isa naman siguro, kung purely mystical, we can go to the Platonic trajectory naman na at the end of the world, let's just kill ourselves because we will exist as, our souls will persist, di ba? Beyond time and beyond space, di ba? Sa Platonic side naman. So, kaya I think people will, some people in the dualists are not necessarily afraid to die. I mean, lalo na in the religious sense, because the image will persist. The image will persist. So, kaya nga curious nga ako na when you die, what if it's all silence? I think that para ako mas fear ko pa na if you die, it's just the abyss. I'm curious nga how heaven looks like kasi parang paano yun? Parang how do you what is the image there? Diba? So syempre we can never know kasi we're still alive. No? So we can only think of revelation siguro sa Christian tradition. So with that, see you next week. Thank you everyone. Bye.